Summary of Make Your Home Among Strangers by Jennine Capó Crucet. A successful research scientist, Lizet Ramirez thinks back on her first year at Rawlings College. She starts her story on Thanksgiving Day, 1999. At the end of the holiday, she and Ariel Hernandez both arrive in Miami. Ariel Hernandez is in the news because he was the only person to survive a dangerous trip on a raft from Cuba to the United States. Lizet, a first-generation college student who has been having trouble socially and academically all through her first term, just got back to Miami. Home, on the other hand, might be even harder than school. Ricky and Lourdes, Lizet's parents, just broke up, and Lydie, Lizet's older sister, is raising her baby son Dante on her own because her ex-boyfriend Rolly won't help. Lizet spends the weekend thinking about whether or not she should say that she is in the middle of an academic ethics hearing at school because she accidentally copied part of an English paper. When she tries to talk to her family about school, they don't understand and still think it's a huge insult that she chose to go to college in the first place. Lizet goes back to school after only a few days. She hasn't seen her dad or her boyfriend, Omar, and she hasn't told her family what's really going on at school. Lizet leaves as the house where Ariel is staying, which is just down the block from Lourdes' new apartment in Little Havana, becomes the center of citywide protests in support of Ariel's request for protection under the United States wet-foot or dry-foot policy for Cuban refugees. Lizet goes back to Rawlings, and in a few days, her copying charges are dropped as long as she improves her grades. Lizet starts learning even harder than before because she has learned to work hard. Lizet's wealthy white roommate, Jillian, wants to argue with her about Ariel Hernandez, but she also thinks that Lizet, as a Cuban-American, is too close to the situation to give an unbiased opinion. Lizet, meanwhile, becomes friends with Ethan. Even though they flirt a little bit, Lizet stays committed to her shaky relationship with Omar. Lizet goes home for Christmas to Miami, but when she gets there, she finds that her mother is totally focused on Ariel Hernandez and his family. She spends her days making signs, going to protests, and helping Ariel's family, especially Caradalis, Ariel's older cousin who is about the same age as Lizet. Lydie is always making fun of how white Lizet is acting since she went to college, and when she finally finds her father, she finds out he lives in a dangerous part of town with a friend she's never met. After Lizet has been there for a few days, Omar gives her a promise ring. Lizet agrees, and even though she told herself she wouldn't sleep with Omar until she knew more about her grades and her future at Rawlings, she and Omar end up making out. Lizet's grades finally come out on the last day of the year, and she's glad to see that she did well and won't have to take any makeup classes. That night, Omar and Lizet go out to a club to party. Before Lizet goes back to school, Omar suggests she go see his mother so she doesn't think something is wrong with her too. When Lizet asks what too means, Omar tells her that he, his mother, and more people in the community are worried about Lourdes' obsession with Ariel Hernandez. She has been on the local news several times and has been making up stories about how she brought her own daughters over from Cuba on a raft, even though Lydie and Lizet were born in Miami. Lizet promises to go with her mother to the New Year's Day gathering in support of Ariel and find out what's really going on. At the gathering, Lizet is surprised by how much emotional support there is for Ariel. When she sees the boy, she realizes that many Cuban Americans see in him a reflection of their own problems. Lizet is also surprised to find out that Lourdes seems to be friends with Caradalis and the rest of Ariel's family. Lizet starts to understand how her mother feels, and she gets angry that Omar, Lydie, Ricky, and Zoila have made rude comments about Lourdes' obsession with Ariel. Lizet thinks that all Lourdes is doing is trying to make it in her new area and get used to the fact that she is no longer with Ricky and that Lizet is going to college. On Tuesday, there is another gathering, and Ariel's uncle tells the crowd that Ariel's father in Cuba has been given custody of the boy, and that Ariel's uncle will be deported in 2 weeks. Everyone in the crowd in front of Ariel's house starts to cry and scream. Lourdes is so upset that she passes out and falls to the ground. Lizet tries to wake up her mother, Lourdes, but Lourdes' friends push her away. Lizet learns that no one there knows that she is her mother's daughter. During Lizet's last few days in Miami, Ariel's family sues for temporary custody. When Lizet lands in New York on her way back to Rawlings, she sees on the news that the government has given it to them. Lizet wants to forget about her affair and focus on her studies during her first few days back at Rawlings. She likes her new lab class, which is given by Dr. Kaufman, a researcher. Lizet does well in school, but now that she is sort of engaged to Omar, she has trouble keeping her friendship with Ethan and fears when Jillian pushes her to get a summer job. Lizet is doing so well in lab that Dr. Kaufman offers her a summer research job in Santa Barbara. Lizet is thrilled by the news, but she doesn't know how to tell her parents, who are sure to be upset. Lizet walks by the TV room in her dorm building one afternoon and sees that her mother is on the national news for a group she has never heard of. Madres para Justicia, which means Mothers for Justice. Lizet is confused, upset, and even angry. In all of her phone calls with Lydie and Omar over the past few weeks, they have told her that Lourdes barely has anything to do with Ariel and his family anymore. When some of the other girls in Lizet's dorm who are watching the show question her claim that it's her own mother on TV and imply that, as an American, she isn't prepared to talk about the Ariel problem, Lizet lies and says she was born in Cuba. Lizet's lies are made stronger when, out of the blue, her mother, who is also lying, starts talking on TV about taking her children from Cuba. Lizet makes sure to ask Lydie how Lourdes is doing when she calls home over the next few days. Lydie says that Lourdes is fine. Lizet wants to talk to Ethan about the problems she is having, but he tells her that he has been accepted to graduate school at Berkeley. Lizet has a hard time being happy for Ethan because she's sad that he's going to leave soon. She sees that her parents must have felt the same way when she got into school. Ethan and Lizet get into a terrible fight. When Lizet has no one else to talk to, she starts closing herself off from everyone and even Professor Kaufman by turning down the prestigious job. Lizet books a flight home for Easter because things are getting worse at school and at home. She wants to try to talk some sense into her mother. When Omar picks Lizet up from the airport, they get into a big fight. During the fight, Lizet asks Omar why he didn't tell her the truth about Lourdes. He says that Lizet couldn't do anything from school. Omar tells her that she made a selfish decision to leave Miami in the first place, so it's her fault that Lourdes is in such a bad situation. The next day, Lizet goes to Lourdes' apartment and tells Lydie about lying about Lourdes. She wants to know the truth. Lydie says that Lourdes has been spending all of her time over at Ariel's, where she has been praying around the clock as part of the Madres para Justicia's prayer, which will last until Easter weekend. Lourdes takes Lizet to a house across the street from Ariel's. There, she gets into a fight with a boy she knew in high school named Victor. He calls Lizet a sellout for leaving Miami and makes it sound like she only came back to spy on the Madres. Lizet falls asleep on the couch that night. Lizet is woken up by a woman shouting just before dawn. She runs outside to see what's going on and sees that Ariel's family home has been raided and Ariel is being taken away to be with his father. Lizet goes to Ariel's house to look for Lourdes. She finds Lourdes holding Caradalis in Ariel's racing bed, and she realizes that her mother has replaced both her and Lydie with Caradalis. As the sun comes up, she goes home. The next day, no one but Omar will drive Lizet to the airport. As he lets her off at the airport, he asks her if their relationship is over. She says that it is, and he says that he should go. Back at Rawlings, Lizet and Ethan get into another fight. She knows she could tell him the truth about what's been going on with her, but she decides it's easier and less painful to just let him go. Professor Kaufman asks Lizet why she won't do the job. Lizet tells him that she has to be with her family in Miami this summer. Kaufman doesn't seem to understand why Lizet is giving up her own happiness for the sake of her family, so he tells her one last time to think about taking the job. Even though Ariel has been removed, Lizet goes back home at the end of the semester and spends her days watching Dante and driving Lourdes to protests and gatherings. After a few weeks of this, Lizet finally loses it. She calls Professor Kaufman to ask if she can still do the job, and the next day she books a $600 trip. When she tells Lydie and Lord, Lydie gets angry, but Lord says in a cold way that Lizet should be able to choose herself over her family if she wants to. Lord calls Ricky and tells him to go get Lizet, who is no longer wanted in her home. The next day, Lizet takes a plane to Santa Barbara after saying goodbye to Ricky with tears at the airport. After a few years, Lizet is getting ready for the chance that her job will soon send her to Cuba to study the reefs there. She feels that going to the island her parents left and can never go back to would be a big insult, but she also knows that she must follow her own goals and dreams no matter what. She thinks about the election in 2000, when she voted by mail from her college room. The race between George W. Bush and Al Gore was complicated by rumors that Al Gore ordered the raid on Ariel's house. As Lizet punched a hole in her ballot, she couldn't have known about the voting scandal that would happen after the election, or that even though her vote probably wouldn't be counted, it would hurt her no matter who she voted for.
About the author. Jennine Capó Crucet is born in the United States. She has become known as a historian of the Cuban-American experience. How to Leave Hialeah, her first book of short stories, was praised by both fans and reviewers. Her first book, Make Your Home Among Strangers, was a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, won the International Latino Book Award for Best Latino-Themed Fiction in 2016, and was on the long list for the 2015 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Crucet teaches English language and literature at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He has a BA from Cornell University and an MFA from the University of Minnesota. She writes a column for the New York Times often. In it, she talks about her hometown of Miami, her adventures as a first-generation college student, and her Cuban refugee parents, among other things.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.